TV.
Hello, Hopkinton, and welcome to the Hopkinton Hangout Hour. It is the first Monday of the month, which means it is Superintendent Day. So thank you so much for joining us. We're happy to have you here. And also, we have Dr. Cal Kavanaugh, who is our Superintendent of Schools. And we're going to be talking about some new guidance coming down from DESE. And we're going to be talking about the pool testing that's available at the schools. And we're also going to be talking about mentioning a upcoming vaccine clinic that is available to some of our students. So Dr. Kavanaugh, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Jim. Always happy to be here. Exciting topics for today.
Yes, you know what? It really is, with no hyperbole, it is really fast moving. You know, there's just like things are just really turning out fast, and there's just a lot of information out there. So just to recap very quickly, DESE, DESE is an acronym for the Department
of Elementary and Secondary Education.
Right.
And last week, the commissioner announced that he was going to issue new guidance about quarantining for close contacts, and that only applies to close contacts in classroom settings or on the school bus. So it's very, very limited as to where you have become a contact, and whether or not that will or will not impact your quarantining period. So,
Okay.
yes. Now, I know that this has caused an awful lot of confusion in the community. If you were talking to other school districts, some did adopt this guidance, some did not adopt the guidance. Some just unilaterally, the superintendent decided that we were going to adopt it. In other places, the Board of Health may have voted on it, or the school committee may have voted on it. It all depends really on what the community does. So I know that, say, for example, Medfield, Medway, Ashland did, but there were other communities around us who also did not adopt the guidance.
Okay. One community that you mentioned so far, that I have not mentioned so far, is Hopkinton. Has Hopkinton adopted the guidance?
We did indeed, yes. And I'll just talk a little bit about it. So if you are an in the classroom close contact, so imagining we now have 18 kids in the classroom and the student next to me becomes COVID positive. In the olden days, if we can say olden days, in a 13-month pandemic, I would have had to go home, and I would have been able to test on day 5 from my exposure. And if I tested negative, I could come back on day 8. What the new guidance says is I still have to test on day 5, but I don't have to leave school at all. I can continue to come into the classroom fully masked and learn every single day, even though I'm a close contact. Now, I think what DESE did was they continued to look at close contacts across the state, really, and say how many of those kids who were deemed close contacts in a classroom actually turned up COVID positive. So that here in Hopkinton, we're in the 200s now in terms of how many kids have tested positive. And, to be really honest with you, of all of those students who have tested positive, we've had one positive student give it to another student, one positive student give it to a paraprofessional, and one positive student give it to a teacher. So there have been 3 in-class transmissions. And, as we look at some of those, we say, well, things maybe could have been done a little bit differently. So we kind of have a sense of what went well and what didn't go so well. But right now, and the other thing that has changed is, that when we brought everybody back from hybrid to full-time in person, we decreased the social distancing from 6 feet to 3 feet from edge of seat to edge of seat, which is probably like 4 feet nose to nose. And that's only in classrooms that warrant it. If we can still get 6 feet, we do 6 feet, but in some places we cannot. So 2 big changes. Kids are closer together, and now your close contacts in classrooms don't have to stay home for the quarantining, they can attend school.
Okay, so I have a question.
Okay.
As you were talking about that, very interesting to me. So the school has really been gathering a lot of data. We seating charts and where kids are during the day and stuff like that. Are you able to say, with the three cases that you talked about, student to student, student to paraprofessional, and student to teacher, where, like, was the student in the front row up near the teacher, or somewhere else?
So I guess a good example would be the student who was working with the paraprofessional. Because the para was working with the student one-on-one, they were certainly closer, I think, even than 3 feet for a significant amount of time. So that's one of the situations where we say, well, that one didn't really surprise us. But when we do look at the one that was student to student, that one was surprising to us because we believed that we had maintained the 6 feet of social distancing. The kids are really good about wearing their masks, so where that happened in the school, it would be hard to say. I mean, maybe it was a transmission at lunch, because they're not only in class together, but they're also in lunch together with masks off. But that one was one that we said, that one, it was hard. That was one, a little bit of a tough one to swallow, I think, for us,
Yeah. And we had talked last time about the MIT study, which thought that maybe distance apart was not as important as masking and ventilation and fresh air, that perhaps those were more key to trying to prevent the spread.
That's absolutely true. So, parents will say, well, why are you doing this? Do you feel like it's unsafe? But I keep going back to, our kids have been out of school since March of 2020. So it has been 13 months. And, I will say that Hopkinton did an amazing job of putting together a hybrid learning plan that kept kids coming every other day. So there was nice continuity of learning. If kids were doing their at-home assignments, there was great continuity of learning. I would wager to say that our kids academically have kind of kept up. But I also worry about what happens when when I say that we have literally had hundreds, if not 1,000 or more close contacts since September. These are kids who have now been required to sit at home and they're not unhealthy, they test negative, but they've been sitting home sometimes for 5 days without that contact with their teacher. And I think what made our hybrid model successful is that every other day you had contact, but when you were sitting at home, you were missing all of that contact. So if we now have kids coming every day and you're getting direct instruction every day from a teacher, it feels like it's really not good academically, I think, to have our kids just sitting at home waiting, biding time for them to come back in. And I know people would say, but Carol Kavanaugh, the academic piece should not be all that important. But I also like to think that there's a social, an emotional, and a behavioral, and a mental health component where kids, they will report that they are happier in school, they feel connected in school. And so, I like to weigh that in there as well. They get something academically, but they also get something socially, emotionally, behaviorally. So sitting out for 5 days is just, I don't think it's really super healthy. I like
So,
to
you know what? I'm not going to, I wouldn't debate that point, because I think everybody agrees with what you just said. And, the more that kids can be in school, the better it is. And I'm not going to really take the angle of like, well, let's talk about, I don't know how contagious they are. But one number I would be interested in, if you have this, I don't know if you have this, since the pandemic began and since we started having students quarantine if they were close contacts, do we know the total number of students that quarantined and then the total number of students that then became positive after being a close contact?
We do. The nurses absolutely have that number because they keep all of that data. The only number that I'm really prepared to share with you now. So if you had say you had 250 students who had contracted COVID, and they each had 4 close contacts. Sometimes it's many, many more if they're on an athletics team or if they're part of a club or those kinds of things. And sometimes it's only 2 because a student sits in the back corner of the room and has somebody who is south and somebody who is west, but doesn't have a north or an east, right? So sometimes it's only 2, but if you went up to the 1,000 kids, just say in the classroom, we really have had only 1. So, the risk to me is negligible. And I think the benefits of coming into school and being able to be educated certainly outweigh that risk. And I know parents have decisions to make about that.
Right, that's true. However, I do think that's a really important number because I've always said all through this, there are people in my orbit who would be arguing, that Governor Baker is doing a terrible job because, you know what, this state needs to open up or else business is going to die on the vine. And then other people will say Governor Baker is doing a terrible job because he has to shut the whole state down because this is a dangerous virus, And I've always said that I'm really glad I'm not Governor Baker because it's just the same kind of position that you have. It is a really big balancing act. This virus can be deadly. This virus can be easily transmitted. You have 14 months of data to try to weigh how close we get and how long they quarantine for and stuff like that. So I think that's like definitely you have to thread a line there, and you got to put everything on the scales.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I think that that's what this whole year has been, just kind of a balancing act, So how do you set up your schedule to maximize learning? How do you set up a schedule to maximize time with teachers? How do you set up a schedule so that kids have continuity? When are you going to, I don't know, decide to bring kids back? I mean, all of those kinds of questions. And, we've pretty much done it with a lot of community input, but at the end of the day, the superintendent and the school committee are very frequently making these decisions really on behalf of 4,000 kids and, thousands of parents as well. So it is a tricky situation.
Right. Another thing I'm curious about with all the numbers that are flying in, what's the distribution between the schools from Marathon up to the high school? Is it heavier in the middle or the high school, or is it more evenly across the board? How does that look?
So parents who would like to have this information, they can always visit the Hopkinton Public Schools dashboard. It's super helpful, I think. But Marathon has had 37 cases and Elmwood has had 35 as of sort of this very moment in time, because that's how we continue to update them. Hopkins has had 30. I don't know what they're doing over there, but they have remained low for all of this time. And the middle school is at 60 and the high school is at 90. And I don't know if you were following, last week's situation, but I think the high school probably had 20 cases, more than 20 cases for sure last week. And as you look at those numbers, it does kind of make you wonder, what were people doing over April vacation?
Right.
Because
right.
Yeah.
And that leads me, this is called the segue, leads me right into this next little point, which I think is really great. And we should mention this, is that Sean McAuliffe just put out a press release that on May 8th, there is going to be a vaccination clinic that is open to people 16 and over. So that could be potentially 2/3 of the high school that is available to be vaccinated. And I think that's tremendous.
So I probably do owe some high school students a little bit of an apology, because I know that some of our 18-year-olds are, partially vaccinated. Maybe a few of them are now fully vaccinated. And, as I watch them get out of school and get into cars unmasked, I say, what are you doing? But I think that's just my old mindset of, you kind of forget that the kids are also on this train to vaccination. I would really encourage the parents of 16-year-olds, if they can get them to the DoubleTree, get in touch with Public Health Director Sean McAuliffe to get the details of how it's going to work. But the Pfizer vaccine, you get that vaccine first dose, and then 3 weeks later, second dose. And I mean, imagine that in 5 weeks, kids 16, 17, and 18 could really be vaccinated in our high school. That would be an amazing game changer. Like, that's the kind of thing that almost makes me like a little weepy, because it's been such a long time coming that it's kind of a dream fulfilled. It's really wonderful to think about that safety.
It really is. And what I think is important, when I talk about it with my family, I have one member of my family who was like, just because you're vaccinated doesn't mean the world is normal. And it's not about that. You know what? It's 95% chance that you're not going to get it. And if you do get it, it's a 100% chance that you're not going to die. And I was reading recently that every vaccine has breakout cases, have cases that get through that. And the number had 3 or 4 zeros to the right of the decimal point. And the person who's writing the article said, I was really surprised at how low that number was. So, I mean, the vaccine is just doing a great job. And it's interesting because as the CDC evolves, there are new things coming. Like recently, people who are fully vaccinated, it's okay by the CDC guidelines to not wear a mask while you're outdoors doing certain activities if you're not in large groups and stuff like that. That's another step toward normalcy. And I was watching a podcast earlier today. They were talking about that, and they were like, President Biden's still wearing a mask. And I think, the answer that these people had, well, he's setting a good example. And I think that's really nice, because there are still a lot of Americans who can't yet, get to that point. So that's really good. But wow, if the high school, which has the bulk of the cases, can get vaccinated, that's really going to bend that curve down.
It certainly is. Yes, that's an absolute game changer for us. It really is. And I know that speaking of high school kids, I know that there are some parents who are wondering why the commissioner's close contact guidance doesn't apply to athletics. And, I really don't, I'm not inside the commissioner's head, so I don't really know what his answer would be to that. And I also know that there are all kinds of rules and regulations that govern athletics through MIAA. But in a strange way, I wonder if he isn't sort of putting a blanket across all athletics. And, there are some that have hardly any risk and some that have greater risk. So if you are playing a contact sport where there's an awful lot of time that people are like huddled together, and then, that's a very different sport from something that could be highly individualized, like golf, for example. You essentially could play an entire round of golf and not really be within 6 feet of another person.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. I wonder, I don't know if anybody in your circles is contemplating things like this or discussing it, but imagine, like, right now that 16 and older are able to get it, do you conceive there could ever be a possibility where if you want to join a team in the next season or two, you need to be vaccinated?
Well, that could happen. That we do require all kinds of vaccines for attendance in public education, right? I mean, earlier this year, you remember that there was a requirement that every child get a flu vaccine.
Yeah.
And every school committee meeting, I'd have this almost countdown. Okay, people, we're down to about 380 kids. Let's go. And I was always worried about, the school nurses at the end just having this incredible, deluge of, oh, look, there's 200 kids that just get vaccinated. I better get my paperwork in order, which could take forever and ever. But it was very strange that they suddenly just lifted that requirement because they said, you know what? We're sorry we did that to you, because no one's getting the flu, because everybody is masked up. There's hardly anyone's getting anything except for COVID,
I know. And I was thinking, as you were saying, I was like, oh yeah, that's right. We did have a flu season, didn't we? I don't remember hearing anything about it.
Yeah.
But you know what? But not only, not now that's interesting. Not only is everybody separated and everybody masked up, but also everybody had to get a flu vaccine. So that must be different than years previous. It must have been a higher rate of vaccination among the flu vaccines. So I'm sure that had a positive effect as well.
Yes, I think so. Yeah, well, I guess I'll say this right now. I shouldn't probably say this on TV, but I'm one of those people who I've missed a year or two in terms of the flu vaccine. If it's convenient and it's right here, it is wonderful. We do a clinic every year, so it would be hard to say, there was a reason not to do it. But this was a year that, I myself would never have missed that flu vaccine.
Right.
And I don't know, we've just had this sort of strange heightened alert to it.
Yeah.
So I think people have been really, really cautious around everything this year, including
Right.
the flu. But yes,
Right.
I mean, to answer your question, we've probably talked a long way around this, Jim, but I think that, yes, I mean, at some point, a COVID vaccine is probably going to be mandatory in public education. And I have, no connection to public health. I can't say that with any kind of authority, but that would be my opinion.
Right. All right. So a couple more things. Maybe we'll get to both of them, maybe we won't, but let's start with to make sure we get this in. Let's talk some more about pool testing. Is the swimming team involved in this? Tell us about pool testing.
All right. We, as people will know, we were not a district that signed on to pool testing immediately. If you are doing the state's pool testing, the Binax testing, I mean, the way it works is everybody takes that swab test and then they pool all of those swabs together and test them all together because it's less expensive to do it that way. So if we have a pool of 15 swabs and they're all negative, hooray, one test, 15 kids, yay. But the problem comes about when you say, oh goodness, look at in that 15, somebody, maybe one person, maybe two people, maybe all 15 are positive. So then they have to do sort of a reflex test. And if you're using the Binax now, which I know a lot of districts are, and they're having success with it, you have to do a retest of all of those kids. One of the concerns we had here is that we didn't want to have to pull kids out of class or to quarantine them until we could get them all together and get that process working. So we are using a company called JCM Analytics. And what happens is, if my swab goes in and your swab goes in, they have a way to personally identify and correlate you to your swab and me to my swab so that they can do the reflex testing right in the lab. And they could say, Carol Kavanaugh is the positive in that group of 15. So that's a really nice piece. And it's super easy. So if you're a high school or a middle school student, tomorrow morning, you'll come in and you'll just drop off your swab packet. You will have swabbed at home. Everything is back in a little packet. You scan your swab and it goes into a batch and away it goes. You don't have to worry about
it. Is this a type of test that goes back up into your cranium?
No, it is not.
Okay.
It's really funny that people will ask that question, and that what I have not actually taken the JCM swab test, but they will tell me that it's not painful in any way, doesn't cause kids anxiety or anything like that. And you know what? If parents do sign their children up and the children seem to be unable to do it, just because it seems, it causes the kids some kind of angst. Once you're signed in, you don't have to stay in. I mean, we'd like you to, but if something happens where you feel like, it's not right for you or your child, you can always leave the JCM analytic testing.
Okay. So Tuesday is the day that they drop off swabs. When do they pick them up?
So you can get a brand spanking new one when you do your drop off,
Okay.
So, and then, what you want to do is either do your swab Monday night and keep it in the refrigerator overnight, or you can do it Tuesday morning before you come to school, and away they go. So we actually did have a couple of positives in our first round, and I don't know if the first round was last week. So I don't know if, again, that's related to some of the behavior over April vacation, that we might've been finding that, but it was nice to be able to find it and then take those asymptomatic kids and say, you have to go home and recover from COVID and then rejoin your classmates after your period of quarantine and isolation. So that was really great. I am sincerely hoping more families will engage. I mean, it takes about 5 minutes to unpackage your swab, package it all back up again. And then at the elementary levels, we do sort of classroom service. So we go in, we pick up all the swabs on a given day. And, I mean, it's really nice. So no kid is even, there's no loss of time on learning. It's
Right.
just seamless. Yes.
So quick question on that, kind of different, but related on that. Is that being paid for by your budget, by the school district?
Technically, I guess it is school department money, but it's really money that came from like an ESSER grant. I mean, that's what the federal government decided to do, is to give money to school districts for all kinds of COVID related purposes. And one of ours is pool testing. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, early on we had such low numbers, but they're creeping up now. And I think, maybe that's just because people are feeling so much more relaxed now that so many people are vaccinated.
Yes, I do have some people in my orbit who have said things like, well, you know what, it's just been so long. I'm like, it's not about time. It's not about time. The virus isn't looking at a clock, it's about vaccination. It's about infection levels. It's about paying attention to all this stuff. It's just something we have to do to get through this, because what a race we are in to try to get to herd immunity before there's some kind of variant that can overcome this vaccine. And then we're back to square one again. It's just so important. I mean, as you see what's happening in India, it's just so sad. It's just running rampant there. Yeah. So I just hope that more and more people decide that this is the right thing to do and sign up for it.
Yes, I think, in order to do things like senior week, we may actually be requiring our seniors, unless they are fully vaccinated, to take part in the pool testing. Now, the one thing that we don't want to see is a student not be able to attend graduation, for example, because I rode on the bus to Fenway with you and you were COVID positive, and now I can't come to my own high school graduation. Like, that would be tragic. So, I mean, I think if we ask the seniors to do this, they should do it not just for themselves, not for the school, but for one another.
Right. Right. Very good point. Yeah. All right. And at that point, we're just about out of time. Just have one quick question. I don't know if there's any knowledge here yet, but as you communicate with Desi, do you see like what might be happening in the future? What next steps might be? Are they talking about like, oh, if things go well, or if they don't, anything like that?
Well, we are going to be monitoring the contact tracing and close contact data, because we want to make sure that if we're bringing all of our kids in and they're closer together and we're not requiring in classroom contacts to quarantine, we want to just make sure that that's working, because we always have the opportunity to do the 180, do a little bit of an about face on that, and turn ourselves around and say it's not working, let's go back to where we used to be. But I think for the fall, Desi is planning on a full-time reopening. And maybe the only exemptions to that would be students with very high risk health issues. Mm-hmm. I mean, it would have to be pretty high risk. And in that case, school districts are thinking about, what will it look like to educate kids who aren't able to come in person. So we are already thinking about that preliminarily.
Okay. Well, if anybody is on that job, that would be a show. That technology department has been fantastic.
Amazing, truly. Yeah. And I know I always steal like a minute of your time, Jim, to thank the technology people, the nurses, the teachers, the paraprofessionals, and it is Teacher Appreciation Week. So if people want to reach out and say thank you to their teachers, I know you've probably been inundated with this, from building principals to the PTO to everybody, but thank you to the teachers and to the paraprofessionals who are serving our kids every day.
Excellent. All right, Dr. Kavanaugh, thank you so much for this half hour again. I look forward to seeing you soon.
Yes, thanks so much.
All right, have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
let me know when we're clear, Bob.